Welcome to episode 38 of the Talent Intelligence Collective podcast. In this special returning champion edition, I and my brilliant co-hosts Alison Ettridge and Toby Culshaw from Lightcast had the pleasure of welcoming back Gerrit Schimmelpenninck. And yes, I'll probably butcher that pronunciation at least twice during the episode, so apologies in advance, Gerrit. In the news segment, we explored fascinating topics including Toby's cruel but brilliant one-prompt TI challenge sponsored by InDrive, the eye-watering $100 million signing bonuses Meta is allegedly offering to poach OpenAI talent, OpenAI's strategic hire of AI expert Joaquin Candela as their new head of recruiting, and how Trump's education policies are creating a global talent grab as other countries launch massive programs to attract displaced scientists and researchers. In our convo with Gerrit, we dove into his remarkable journey from Amsterdam corporate life to LA entrepreneurship, including his move from Philips to Activision Blizzard and the unique challenges of building TI in the gaming industry, where talent is everything, how he navigated the Microsoft acquisition and turned a layoff into the perfect runway for launching his consulting business, the evolution of Talent Motions and his strategic pivot to focus on competitive intelligence rather than traditional location studies, fascinating case studies of how he's helped clients map competitor organisations for major business decisions, sometimes worth hundreds of millions, his surprising discoveries about the huge variation in TI maturity across organisations, regardless of size or industry, and the exciting stealth project he's building that will give clients 24/7 access to competitor org structures with real-time alerts for strategic shifts, plus some insights on why the best TI work solves business strategy problems, not just HR challenges. So grab your favourite beverage, settle in for an inspiring journey and join us for this deep dive into talent and competitive intelligence with the man who's turned data into strategic gold. So get listening, get learning and stay intelligent, folks. Have fun! Before we get on with the main event, I wanted to remind you that Lightcast kindly sponsors this podcast. Here's a very well-spoken chap to tell you more about them.
Lightcast is the global authority on labour market data. By collecting, analysing and refining profiles, job postings and market data globally, Lightcast provides actionable, data-driven talent intelligence, giving HR leaders the context to make better decisions. The world's top companies trust Lightcast to deliver clarity in a complex world of work. For more, visit lightcast.io.
Right, who's ready for a nice bit of deja vu? So this is episode 38 of the TI Collective podcast, and we have a returning champion in the house, someone who's been busy reshaping the talent intelligence landscape since we last spoke.
Yay!
But before we get on to that, in the virtual studio with me today are my dynamic duo, my dynamic co-hosts from Lightcast, Alison Ettridge and Toby Culshaw. Say hello, guys.
Hello, guys.
Hey, guys.
Hello, guys. Now, back in episode 11, we had a fascinating chat with today's guest about building talent intelligent functions at major organisations. Since then, he's gone from transforming TI Activision Blizzard to launching his own business and doing some other cool things that we might hear about. So please welcome back to the show, Gerrit. Gerrit, could you introduce yourself, please?
Hey. Yeah, thanks for having me again. I'm Gerrit. Lots has changed since we last spoke. I was still at Philips. Since then, moved to Los Angeles and I started my own consulting business called Talent Motions. It's all about talent intelligence.
That makes sense. Why would it be anything else?
That's right.
Good job too, really, based on what we do right, on the pod.
Yeah, it's relevant. It is somewhat relevant, I would say. Yeah, for sure.
For those that are new to the show, here's how we roll. First up, Toby is going to give us his trademark market intelligence roundup, market talent intelligence roundup. Then Alison will lead the chat with Gerrit, and I'm really going to be really keen to hear about how you've segued from the big corporate world, Gerrit, into running your own business. I think it's going to be a fascinating story. So, Toby, over to you. What's happening in the world? What's going down?
So the most exciting thing globally at the moment is that the Talent Intelligence Collective is having a one prompt challenge. Much more important than anything else that's going on out there, which is basically on the face of it, it's a really simple challenge. It's you get to write one prompt to try and complete a location analysis for InDrive, who are sponsoring the challenge. So thank you very much, and a big shout out to Keen August and InDrive. And you've just got to write one prompt, and that's it. Where it gets tricky is you're not allowed to nudge or prompt, so it's got to be a one and done type piece. And it's obviously got to be as complete as possible. So there's lots of things where you're seeing figmentations and hallucinations, and you're seeing that the actual systems are trying to drive certain outcomes from the question and the prompt. So it's really interesting and see how it's going. That's open and live till the 27th. And then I'm going to do a full-on write-up and publish all the prompts and everything so we can all get some learnings out of it and see what the good, the bad, and the ugly. But it's really interesting. Like the variance in terms of output, the variance in terms of maturity of prompting, it's pretty wild so far. So it's really interesting to see how we're at as an industry or as a TI collective at the moment in terms of our maturity around prompting and platforms.
I was fascinated by this, Toby. As everybody knows, I'm not a TI practitioner, but I am a AI geek and absolutely fascinated by the capability of some of these tools. And so I had a stab at it myself. And I think the one prompt rule is cruel. I'm going to say it because I can get something out of it with one prompt on most of the platforms. But I could get something really good out of all of them if I was just allowed to give it a couple of nudges here and there. I think I showed you one example, didn't I, Toby? And I'm not categorically going to say now, line in the sand, I'm not entering. But I think the one prompt thing is cruel, really cruel.
I think sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, it is cruel, and I know it's cruel. But the reason for the one prompt is twofold. One, it's because I wanted people to really think about what the potential power could be and how much can you control the output off of one prompt. And the other piece was so that it can be reproduced, is the honest answer. The danger is if you can have multiple prompts, you don't really know what that process has been and how we've ended up at the end point. So I can't reproduce it. And what I didn't want to happen is someone does a massive full-on TI location strategy with all their own primary data sources and everything else, and then just packages it and just says, this is the output. And it was done via a gajillion prompts. So it's never going to be perfect, but 100% is a limiting factor for the conversation. But Alison,
sorry, go on, you go.
Well, I was just going to say, so I had a bit of an aha moment this week. So I've been in Stockholm at the Future Talent Council, which is all about the interaction between AI and humans and what's going to happen, which was really cool. And there was a guy called Dr. Michael Gerrit, who was talking on day 2. And for those of you who are into AI, this will make perfect sense. But for me, this was like a light bulb moment. He was basically saying that if you don't prompt AI to give you an opposing opinion, it's basically been created to make you feel better. Yeah, and so, so the results that you get out are going to be what you want to read. And I've got a project that's going on something different at the moment. I was like, oh my God, I'm being conned by this bloody thing. So I now need to go in and, ask for opposing opinions. And I think it will be really interesting to see whether or not anybody, and this clearly will come out after the competition is closed. It'll be interesting to see whether anyone has thought about it in that light. Have they thought about give me alternatives, give me different opinions as part of that one prompt?
It's a big time people pleaser with that. All of them are. They want you to be happy with the output that they produce for you.
I was very happy until Dr. Michael Gerrit ruined my life. Yeah.
But what's also interesting is if you put the same. I've actually not with this test, Toby, but with other things in the past. I've put the same prompt in 10 times, and should we say the variance in answers is quite broad each time. Yeah. So it'll be interesting to see what the guys who are probably more on the ball in terms of wanting to validate the output than I was with my experimentation, how much they'll pick up on it.
He was talking about metacognitive prompting. I was like, well, by the time we're doing that, I might as well just do the location study. It's probably just as easy.
I think, to both those points, I think it's an interesting thing is, Alan, to your point, it's definitely people that understand location studies and understand talent intelligence that are answering, but they don't necessarily understand how these systems are working as well as, say, you would, and the prompt engineering behind it. And I think the other piece, as well as wanting to please you, really all these systems are predictive text on steroids. It's just looking at statistically what's the most likely thing. And given the question that's being posed by InDrive, and the fact it's a broad skill set, broad number of job functions and job titles, et cetera, what I've noticed is all of the responses are tending towards the tech element of the study. And what I'm theorizing is, because over time there's been way more written about tech, talent crises and talent intelligence or labor markets, et cetera, that it's skewing the answers. And so when it's going out there and rooting around trying to find its solutions, it's skewing everything towards the tech piece, whereas in reality, that's not even necessarily the main part of what's needed for the customer.
Really interesting.
And you can only use publicly available data, right, in this prompt challenge?
Exactly that. So it is purely open source stuff.
Right.
You can direct it towards certain open source stuff. So you can say, I only want you to use data sets from the ILO because it's my trusted source or whatever. So within the rules, you can direct it, but you can't have proprietary data input in the back end, which is obviously another limitation. Obviously it's not going to give you the prime output. Exactly. But what I'm finding generally is the standard of output can be visually amazing, and you can create some really compelling, amazing reports that are fully dynamic and they look phenomenal. But as we mentioned, like the data underlying it is nearly always a bit sketchy. It's always a bit ropey.
Can people use dummy data?
For this case, no. Okay. Purely because it is a real live situation. Like InDrive are looking to do this work. They're wanting to see what the correct solution could be. So they are. Right. It's a real situation. But it's an interesting one, because I think what it is for me, it's showing is once you have these capabilities and overlay it with a really controlled data set. Yeah. That's when things get turbocharged, because what this is showing is the capability is there, but the data control isn't.
Yeah, that's when it gets really, really sexy. We're some of the tools we're building for clients now, where we're building front end large language model powered interfaces for their HR systems, their applicant tracking systems, etc., where the data they're pulling on is super structured. It's coming from those kind of platforms. The power they're getting out of those and the comfort that it's accurate, because it's only in theory, it's only centered around real, actual data. Incredible. But as soon as you let it go run amok into the big wide world and it decide where to pull information from, you really haven't got a clue what it's going to come back with, to a degree, because to your point, sometimes it's the heaviest or loudest noise rather than the best, and it doesn't really know what good is. It just knows what it hears the most, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's the right stuff.
It's really, Gerrit, have you heard of a company called EPAM, Gerrit?
I have not, no.
Okay, no, so I hadn't heard of EPAM either, and they're like a 5 billion market cap business based in the US who are all AI. And when they started out, and they've started about 25, 30 years ago, from the outset, they set themselves up as a skills-based organisation. And what they've done is they've built, because they're software engineers, right? They've built all of their systems, Alan, to your point, are their systems. And then on top of that, they have built an intelligence layer that pulls from all of those different HR systems. So they have everything from performance management to workforce planning to one-to-one management to learning and capability, all drawing in. Yeah. So if someone logs in as an individual and says, actually, I'm interested in this job, it will say, this is what the external market says. This is what the trend is. These are the learning courses that we've got.
Wow.
This is what we predict you can do and how far. I mean, it's just phenomenal. And they're like, we're the biggest company that nobody has heard of who've been doing this data around trends, around salaries. They're also pulling in things like patterns and skills and projects that clients are working because they're software engineers who are ultimately they're a professional services business, right? So they look at patterns and say, okay, what do we think our clients are likely to be asking us for in terms of skills in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months? Have we got those in our organisation? And if not, how do we build them? It's just mind-blowing what they're doing.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very
It's
cool. EPAM.
what everybody tries to build, right?
Yeah. Well, it sounds like Alan's building it. Clearly not for EPAM, sorry, but for other organisations. It's very cool.
Very, very cool.
Right, Toby, what else is happening?
I'm going to slightly jump the order of things I was going to do, and I'm going to do a double whammy of OpenAI. So first up, Sam Altman's been on a podcast with, I think it was his brother in actual fact, and he was saying that Meta have been trying and failing to poach OpenAI's talent with $100 million offers on sign-on bonuses, which is insane. It doesn't really give any more further detail than that, and doesn't really go into it much further. Just kind of throws that little grenade out there and leaves it up in the air for us all. But also the other piece coming out of OpenAI, and we can discuss the validity of that and what we think of that. But the other piece coming out of OpenAI, I think, is really interesting. Half the last pod, where obviously we were discussing their acquisition of Johnny Ive's company and that kind of acqui-hire type piece, they've announced a new head of recruiting for OpenAI, and it's a chap called Joaquin Candela. I'm pretty sure I've completely trashed his name there. But the bit that's really interesting is he's now head of recruiting, but previously he was their head of preparedness. He's a technical fellow of AI from LinkedIn. He's senior fellow over at Harvard. He is an ex-Facebook distinguished tech lead for responsible AI. He's a hardcore AI cutting-edge person that's now taking over their recruiting function. And I just posted on LinkedIn, and he was obviously talking about it and just saying how important it's going to be, and that recruiting has never been more important. And there are under unprecedented pressure to grow. So I just found it fascinating. Fascinating that they're putting him in charge of recruiting. Obviously, we don't know the details. We don't know whether he's going to be more of a kind of a chief ops officer type role within that recruiting and seeing recruiting as the key delivery of the ops function, or whether it's a straight up and down head of recruiting and he's there as a figurehead, whether he's there to drive automation within recruitment. We really don't know the details, but the very fact that person's been parachuted in is fascinating, I think.
And it also really tells you that it's kind of, they're in a struggle right now for talent. And I feel it's on. I mean, the $100 million signing bonus, these type of hires, it seems like talent is massively important right now in the whole AI race. It's always been, but it seems to be, I'm not certain it's peaking, but there seems to be something going on.
It's huge, isn't it? Bonkers.
Yeah, I think it's what's happening now is adoption started at scale, right? And so we've moved from an environment where it was about innovation, and it still is about innovation, but it was about innovation and play. And suddenly it's like, whoa, people are adopting this, and so now we're into market demand. And in order to meet market demand, if you can't meet that through talent, then you're hurting your bottom line. I think that's where it feels like it's kind of shifted up a gear. I think, Gerrit, to your point, it's like, okay, suddenly this is about commercializing it and making sure that we're making money out of it and not the innovation. I think there's an interesting dichotomy between a lack of talent to build something that ultimately is going to impact on the number of people in the workforce. I think it's in a different way, but I think it's quite interesting.
It's really interesting. It's like, actually, the better they get at building it, the better the tool is that they build, the less the need for the talent.
Yes, exactly.
There'll be a perfect storm, won't there, where they'll just cross over. And they'll be like, well, we've nailed it. Why do we know? Because we don't need to hire anyone.
There was another guy at this summit this week, a guy called Carl Benedict Frey, who's the University of Oxford. He's written loads of books in kind of this space and the impact of it. Again, really interesting guy. But he was saying that what the acquihire is doing is that the inventors are increasingly now becoming concentrated in large enterprises. So we're seeing a decline in entrepreneurial inventors. And he's saying that there is a distinct correlation between how inventive those people are and the environment that they are in. And the larger the environment, the less inventive they get.
Yeah, of course.
So
it's going to be more cushy.
Yeah, exactly. So yes,
you need your table to be a door, and right.
And if someone pays you $100 million, right? Yeah, it's kind of like,
it's going to do a little bit of inventing at 11 a.m. or so. And then I'll have a matcha, maybe. And then maybe a little bit more inventing at 2 p.m. I don't know, after nap time.
I can be bothered.
Yeah. You're absolutely right. But I was also thinking maybe we should all get out of TI and back into executive search with $100 million signing bonuses.
Oh, wow.
And I'd like to have a little 20% of that.
Yeah, that'd be nice. I thought you were going to say we should all get out of this and get into inventing.
Yeah, and maybe also great idea.
I'm quite good at inventing, but not software agent, not AI agents for software. So
I'll go back to school and spend 3 years learning how to invent quite happily if someone will then offer me $100 million signing on bonus.
You won't need to by then because the AI will have got so good we won't need it. The people are doing it.
You won't need it. It'll be doing all the inventing itself, won't it?
Exactly. Pace of change of skills.
Toby, have we got any more news?
Well, the last one I'm going to throw out there today is kind of parallelly-ish tied into this, and it's looking at the education system in the US. And the US is essentially having a bit of a roadblock when it comes to kind of scientists and technologists because of President Trump's situation in terms of how they're doing funding and the visas, etc. So, the $3 billion cut in their funding to Harvard University, they've revoked 1,000 student visas. And the interesting bit here is that other countries are now actively targeting the talent because of this. So you've got Australian Academy of Science launched its own global talent attraction program. You've had the EU launch a Choose Europe for Science initiative, which has got like $500 million worth of incentives to attract and retain scientists from outside the EU, which is really interesting. So we've got this crazy situation where we're saying tech talent and STEM, etc., is massively on the rise. We're still equally, though, saying that tech jobs are being rolled back because Gen AI capabilities can write the code, etc., etc. And then you've got the US situation where, from an education perspective, they're saying, well, we're not really going to draw you guys in, and the rest of the world, you can kind of pick up the pieces, which is, it's wild. It really is.
The DTI have been doing this here, I know, for 4 years. Around the kind of core focus areas. I think what's interesting about this is it's not all tech, right? Lots of it is about scientific research. Lots of it is about academic affiliation. Lots of it is about bioscience and biomed, and not necessarily tech. But and as we know, I've waffled on about it before. The Middle Eastern countries are just miles ahead of us here. Saudi and the UAE generally miles ahead in terms of attracting talent there so that they can build, and they talk about, I think it's in this article, they talk about it's not about economic growth, it's about economic security, which is really important.
Yeah, and the Middle East, I think what they got right is they're building the investment ecosystem behind it as well. And I think that's where Europe is faltering still because they have an amazing opportunity right now to pick up some of this talent that would normally go to US universities. Yeah. But as long as you don't have a super attractive investment ecosystem for, startups and everything you want to do after your education, then it's still going to be a tough sell in my mind.
It was one of the things that was interesting to me, though, it came out of, so I was talking to the lady who's head of career services at Harvard this week and the University of California and Yale, who were all at this summit. And one of the things that they were saying is that their PhD students are really struggling to find jobs. And I was like, what? Yeah, and they're really struggling in the US to find jobs. And so
Are they?
Yeah, which I was kind of mind boggled by it. I was like, really? And said, that talent would be snapped up internationally if you've come out of Harvard with a PhD in whatever it might be, right? Biomechanics.
Yeah, you would think so.
Yeah, so it was really, I think, as you said, Toby, it's like there's like opposing views going on all the time on this stuff.
It really is. It really is. And I think that's, I wrote a piece a little while back on the VUCA world becoming a BANI world, et cetera, et cetera.
Becoming a what world?
BANI.
What does BANI stand for?
Oh, I can't remember now. Brittle, agile, something. It's basically the fragility and the extreme reactions. So it's much harder to plan too far out because things are just becoming much more reactive and much more extreme in how they come through. But I think it's fascinating. I really do. I think the instability we're seeing, and yet the irony is of all of this, is that external context is faster moving, more aggressive, more fragile than ever. And yet you're seeing more and more talent intelligence teams and workforce planning teams still getting cut, still getting hit, and companies really still not planning too far ahead. They're still looking short term, squeezing their workforce, squeezing the employee engagement, return to office, et cetera, et cetera. So that we're still at this crossroads where I think employers are still putting the squeeze on. They're still wanting to get their pound of flesh. They know the market's not super hot out there, so the talent's not going to leave. It's a really fascinating period.
And yet, and this kind of like, I think you were going to skip over this one. We're going to bring it up again. So that you found an article that looked at more over 65s expected to stay in the labour market. And I think that was really interesting because what employers seem to not be noticing is we've got this massive population demographic challenge, particularly in Europe and in Southeast Asia. But in 80% of developed countries, the workforce is not growing by 2030. Right? That's massive. So you've got this problem of there aren't enough people. And then you've got, and you know what, the skills are changing so fast, nobody can keep up with it, particularly in roles where there is an expectation that AI is included, non-tech roles, right, where AI is fundamentally changing it. So you've kind of got these two massive things going on that are affecting what you need as an organisation, and yet you're laying off people, or you're not hiring, or you're not thinking about workforce planning. And then you've got companies like EPAM who are predicting what's going to happen 18 months out and thinking about it. It's just... Again, it's another one where it's like, oh my God, what are you not? What are you not seeing? What's going on? It's really interesting.
Just wild. I think TI is too complicated. I might just retire. I think I'm just going to go and become a grass cutter.
Why you go and plan your retirement? Should we get on to the real reason we're here today? Do you think?
Let's do it.
Yeah, Alison, over to you. The hot seat is yours.
Gerrit. Oh my God, what a lot has happened since we last spoke on the podcast. Right? Just loads. So when we last spoke, you were living in Amsterdam and working for Philips. Doing some really cool stuff. Then not very long after we last spoke, you're living in America, and I think you've had more children. And you've definitely set up a new business. So it's kind of like I don't think it's that long since we spoke, but there seems to be quite a lot that happened. So let's talk first of all about the move from Amsterdam to the US. What drove you? Was it worth it? Have you had more babies?
So yes and yes. I was actually ready to start a TI consulting business in Amsterdam. I had business partners lined up. And then out of nowhere came a message on LinkedIn by a recruiter named Angel, by the way, from Los Angeles. It's no joke. If I was interested in setting up the TI function at Activision Blizzard. And I looked at my wife and said, hey, we could do this. There could be one cool corporate job. Set us up there and start a TI business over there, which is going to be more interesting than doing it in the Netherlands. So luckily, my wife was very much up for that adventure as well. So we moved to here and had a baby. Which was,
I knew there was another one somewhere it appeared.
We had a third little baby, which was a little bit of a surprise. So it did complicate things a little bit. Very much wanted, though, I have to say. And so there was a big move for us. I can't deny it's a very different country, very different culture. But we're really enjoying it. And fortunately, everybody is. So far, so good.
So talk a little bit, because it was interesting, because you went, okay, I'm going to do one more big corporate job, which made sense. And you went from what from the outside looking in was a really mature TI function at Philips to completely fresh, starting out, winning hearts and minds at Activision Blizzard. Can you talk a little bit about, the kind of difference between those two things, and then a bit about your journey through Activision Blizzard and how you grew it, and without detail, what was the really good stuff? What was the challenges?
Yeah, so I think when I came in, I was Toby's first hire at Philips. So I saw very much how to sort of grow a function and participated in that at Philips. So when I left it, it was for sure a very mature function. But I had seen something sort of go from nearly zero to quite a substantial function. Mm-hmm. Activision was, I should say, because it's been taken over by Microsoft since, quite a large organization in terms of revenue. In terms of its corporate overhead, it was very small. So coming from Philips, which has a very large corporate overhead and it has, in essence, a larger business. But if you just compare it like per head, there's just a very large headquarters, so to say, there. So Activision, much smaller corporate organization, very, very open to using talent intelligence. It's the gaming industry, which is all about talent. There's a very limited talent pool, so everybody needs to have AAA gaming experience to be a game developer for the studios that are under Activision Blizzard. So there was a lot to do. And it has a very innovative culture. It's very data-driven. There are tons of data scientists. Actually, an amazing environment to found myself. Was under people analytics quite soon. So I had a little bit of a change, but ended up under people analytics, which had made a lot of sense. So yeah, I think that is the main difference.
And for those people who hadn't heard of Activision, you were sort of Call of Duty, Candy Crush, World of Warcraft, that sort of stuff, wasn't it?
Yeah, those are exactly the big franchises, yeah.
There was a guy this week who was talking about World of Warcraft, and I am not a gamer, so I'm about to say this and sound like a complete idiot and very old. But they were saying that because of something that you have to do when you've reached a certain status in World of Warcraft, that they only hired people who had reached level whatever it was in World of Warcraft, which was all about bringing in people that you didn't know. So it was all about managing virtual teams effectively. How do you bring in people that you don't know in order to conquer something? I don't know. I sound like an idiot. But they'd stripped out basically all other hiring requirements. And if someone had reached level blah in World of Warcraft, they were in. I was like, oh my God, that's amazing. I need to start gaming.
That's fun.
Well,
the not so striking thing actually is that most of the developers are hardcore gamers and they're completely into the culture. It's and the culture of their franchise. We actually tapped into that by creating a tool together with McKinsey to identify potential talent within the gaming community. The gamers. So that was a cool sort of TI talent research tool. And I think you want to have people that love games, play games, maybe reach that certain level, right? But it takes a gamer to create games. I think that's for sure.
That's really interesting. And McKinsey's now also have gamification is kind of the first start of their interview process or their processes. You need to come through this approach in order to test it. It's really, really interesting. And I think I've been historically, again, I sound like an old fart, really kind of behind the times in terms of some of the skills that you need in order to kind of be part of it. It's interesting that you quite quickly, because I think when you were hired, you went in via talent acquisition, and then quite quickly, suddenly it was part of people analytics. Was that because of you, because of the business, or just because it made sense?
No, everything was under talent acquisition, actually, even people analytics. So talent is so important for a company like Activision Blizzard. It's basically... So the funny thing was that talent intelligence started under talent development, actually, which was a bit of an odd place to be. And then soon sort of moved to be under people analytics. But eventually everything is under TA there. So that's a bit of an odd way of organizing things. But when you think of like how important talent is, in that business, it's so important that if you don't have your talent right, you might just make a game that's just less good and it won't sell. And it's as simple as that. So they always try to build, for each game or release, they need to build the best team they can. And it's all about talent.
So when you were building TI, was it linked to, this is a game that we are going to build and now we need to build a team around it? Or was it more fluid than that, which is we're going to hire people who are great gamers and then see what they produce, or a combination of both?
No. So there's it wasn't as free as the latter, but still a little bit of a combination of both. I think in that world, there are a couple of forces at play. One of them is studio heads, who are often sort of legends in their world. They might have been the creator or one of the founding creators of a franchise that everybody knows. They have a sort of a magnet function. So people want to work or have worked under that person in their careers. And they are obviously also the generators of ideas. But there is also a strict business cycle of new releases within the franchise, for example, of Call of Duty, that they create those games with studios in different constellations. So they have different roles. Sometimes they're a support studio, sometimes they're the leading studio. And they have to gear up their talent to that sort of release schedule accordingly. And there's a constant hiring happening by the TA folks. But there's also a constant sort of looking at all the other studios and the talent moving back and forth. And I think that was one of sort of my first roles, is to really map that out.
That's really interesting. So the TI focus was lots of competitor intelligence.
Because and also that's also what I made it to be. It's what I enjoyed doing, and then I also think like, well, I think everybody knows the body of talent, right? Because it's limited, because it's people that have done a big game before. So it's going to be more important to sort of see where that limited pool of talent is located and how they move around.
Really cool. And we'll come back and touch on that, I have no doubt, when we talk about secret stuff later, which is very cool. And then clearly big change. And the time was right for you to be going, okay, I am going to set up and do this on my own. What a massive move, right? New country, new business, just talk to us about how you planned that in advance, or whether or not it just sort of happened.
Yeah, so it was always the goal. What I never anticipated was Activision being taken over by Microsoft.
Yeah.
That was sort of announced 2-3 months in my role there.
Yep.
It took more than a year between sign and close because there were all sorts of investigations by market authorities whether this was basically whether Microsoft was getting into a bit of a too strong position.
Yeah.
That as a consequence, a lot of the big business decisions, especially in the M&A space, were on hold.
Yeah.
So from that perspective, for TI, it was a little bit less interesting, right? At Philips, we did a lot of M&A, and TI had involvement in all of those. And so that was a little bit on hold. So I thought, like, okay, if this closes, there's probably going to be a round of layoffs, and I probably won't really mind being part of that, having a bit of a runway to start my own business. And that's how that happened. So after the acquisition closed in, I'm going to say November-ish. In January, there was a big round of layoffs. I was part of it. And in my case, it was actually a bit of a favorable outcome. And I think next Monday, I'd rented an office and started up my business.
So cool. And for those of you who don't know, Gerrit's business is called Talent Motions, which is effectively bringing the power of talent intelligence into the hands of all businesses, even those that can't afford to have them, I think I'm right in saying. How much of the work that you're doing now is the kind of the standard location strategy type pieces, and how much is much more around M&A, acqui-hiring, corporate strategy?
So when I started out, I presented myself as and the business as a business that does all of that. I recently focus more on the competitive intelligence bit.
Yep.
Also to just not have to use too many words pitching the business, which I've come to understand. It's helpful to just have a very clear offering.
Yes.
I still do location strategy. I do think that the tools have grown to be much, much better than they were a couple of years ago. But the more complex location strategy things I still do. And I still think that a big value add is also helping the decision makers go through the process, not just with data, but also with the model, and making sure that everybody keep the conversation data driven, steer away from more anecdotal information or observations by the various decision makers. So I think it's much more about that sort of process guidance rather than purely the data, because I think the data it's easier to get that when you have a tool, for example. So, but I still do that. What I do mostly is competitive intelligence, and really showing what other companies are working on, how that changes over time, what kind of people they're hiring, and especially what kind of things they're hiring for. So, what kind of sort of goals they're hiring for.
Very cool. I'd like to come back and explore that in a minute in more detail. But I've got a question first, which is really interesting for me, which is you went from 2 big in-house jobs to basically being a vendor, right? A good vendor, but a vendor. Yeah. What surprised you about then the companies that you were talking to about TI? Were you surprised by their maturity or lack thereof? What were the things that kind of stood out for you?
So what stood out to me is that some companies have TI of a certain standing, like, or a certain size, arranged as you would expect. So there's a certain level of maturity, and then there are some huge companies that I had the pleasure of working for that have nothing in place and a very immature idea about using TI data, or haven't even thought of doing it for something else than just recruitment. So it's just that there's just such a variation of maturity levels. I think that's what surprised me most. I would think it would be somewhat the same across the board, but the variation is quite a bit. Yeah.
I think what's interesting is there's not a correlation, is there, between kind of vertical market, size of business, maturity of talent acquisition, and then their maturity of talent intelligence. It's kind of a bit hit or miss. You kind of go in and they go, yeah, we're doing it, we're all over it, we understand it, or a million miles away from that.
Exactly. Yeah.
What did you find most frustrating?
I think most frustrating I found in the setting up the business is getting clients. You really, when you're coming from a corporate job, you're very used to wearing a jersey, and that's a big part of, obviously, sort of your identity out there. And when you start a consulting business, you have to build that from scratch again. Obviously, you can leverage some of what you've done before. So that's no joke. And a lot of work goes into that. And once it starts to work, right? But you have to take considerable time and also some sort of self-love building that up.
It's really interesting. I remember you and I talking right in the early days. Like, you've got to put yourself out there. You have to be seen.
You have to do it.
And it's really, it's the hardest thing in the world to do. Once you've started doing it, actually, it's okay. But the hardest thing in the world is to start.
That's true.
Can you talk about some of the projects, the competitive intelligence projects that you have? It's really difficult, right? But have been delivering. Kind of what have some of the outcomes been, or without talking about clients, clearly.
Yeah. So I can't talk about clients, but I can sort of speak of. So in cryptic terms, the latest project I've done was for a coming supplier of one of the largest tech companies in the world, a US tech company. Mm-hmm. They might become their new supplier. And currently this tech company has another supplier. And so this new supplier is interested in understanding how does the current supplier is organized to support this large tech company. And from research and development, from supply chain to manufacturing to quality. It's one of the more secretive organizations in the world. People don't really share a lot on their LinkedIn. Job postings are a little bit vague. So it was a nice challenge, but we managed to map out that entire org chart. And it's not about the org chart, right? Because people, in the end, they are interested in org charts, but they're more interested in, like, what does it tell us, right? How do they work? How do they operate, and at what cost? And so we were able to completely show them what kind of organization their main competitor has built to service this large customer. And it gave them the opportunity to understand what they need to build if they are going to take up this contract in the near future. So that's an example of, like, how people use this type of competitive intelligence, which has very little to do with hiring, but more with org design. And in this case, a big business decision, like, hey, can our organization handle it to do this big new client?
I love that, because there's an element of it being, this is about, as you said, org design, and can we handle it? Did they use any of the data in their bid to remove the current incumbent, or any of the insights?
No, because it was because of technical specifications that they could do something that the current organization competitor couldn't do.
Yeah.
to specific specifications. So it was more around that. So there wasn't any outbidding going on. But sometimes when you're talking about these super large contracts that ask a lot of investment from you to gear up to be able to execute on it, saying yes to it might sound like a no-brainer, but for some organizations, it's a very big decision because it's going to require hundreds of millions of dollars of investment up front to be able to execute on that new client.
Yeah, and it might be a poison chalice, right? If you get it wrong,
their margins might completely be gone. So it was all about that. Like afterwards, are we still going to have the margins?
That's so cool. Can you give us another example?
So another one is around in the finance industry. So there's some players in the finance industry that rely heavily on super highly educated, they call them quants.
Yep.
You might have heard of them. They're people that are creating trading algorithms and so forth. And when they get that right, they make a ridiculous amount of money.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a client that was just very interested in all those teams at their competitors, and basically what kind of people are how they're organized, how do their teams look like. They have no idea. It's a secretive world, and also because these kids, I was going to say kids because a lot of them are kids, but also this talent, it can sort of. They treat LinkedIn a little bit as a joke.
Yeah.
So they say, I'm an Excel wizard or so, right? Just that they don't share a lot. But still, if you look at all the pieces of the puzzle, you're able to give them a great idea like on how those quant teams around the world are structured. And give them an idea like how they want to position their teams. Eventually in the talent market, because it's all about attracting talent. A little bit like the OpenAI Meta story.
Yeah.
Like there's a war of talent going on for a limited talent pool there.
Yeah, so that's really interesting. So that's lots of that is about, I want to say employer branding, but that just sounds so tame in that environment. But actually, how do we position ourselves as a business that this talent is going to want to work for? So that, and do we know where they are? How do we make sure that we're attracting them and going to the right people? But actually, it's lots of it's about the messaging. Really cool. Did you do any sentiment analysis at all on
that? No, because this wasn't per se only about recruitment. It was also very much about how are we going to organize ourselves.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. And all of that is quite interesting because in amongst... Oh, Toby, you put your hand up. Toby, what's that?
Yeah, sorry. I was just going to say, the thing I love about both these examples, it's not a TA or an HR problem. Well, organizational design maybe, but it's more of a business strategy thing on both of those examples, which I think is wonderful. Because I think that's, as we spoken about many, many years, I think TI, it's a business piece. It's a business intelligence that happens to be about labour market and talent and people. But I love the fact both those examples are fundamental to the business and what they're doing.
And actually, sorry, go ahead, Gerrit.
Yeah, Toby and I have been speaking about this when we were at Philips together. And the cool thing about building your own business is you can really go after those clients or those assignments that you feel you want to work at or on, right? So it's been sort of inspired to, obviously I have to be very commercial, and I like to take any assignment that's given to me, and I love working on it. But you get to focus a little bit on what you really like to do, and in my case, it's work on those business problems.
Yeah,
with TI data, because
Gerrit, that's what we're doing. We've done exactly that. We've made sure we go after work that we know we will enjoy at Udder.
That's it.
We do it better.
Yeah.
We do work we know we're going to enjoy. We deliver it so much better than doing work we don't enjoy. So it's
Exactly.
actually good business sense to do that. It's not just about being selective because you want to have a lovely old time. It's about knowing that the one mantra I've had it under all the way through from the very beginning is that if you do good work, everything else will sort itself out.
Yeah.
And if you do good work, it will. It genuinely will. So it's the right thing
Yeah.
to do after work you enjoy, without a doubt.
Yeah.
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 And I think
Thank you for
what's
saying that.
interesting is, for me on that piece, is because you're so tied to the business strategy, who's your client? Who is the person that is fundamentally buying?
Sometimes I sort of get in through competitor intelligence people. I think it's like within like strategy teams. So I think it's strategy teams to begin with. Then it's like business line heads of business lines that are responsible for a certain strategic project. So and then often a combination of the two. I often get in through like HR still, but eventually those are the people that are working on this problem.
And that's one of the things I really like about what you're doing is, when you're in-house, you know that you're in the world of talent, right? Or talent acquisition, or typically, right? Or sitting in HR. And yet you fundamentally know that the people that should be buying from you are the business, right? Or strategy, or
Exactly.
And it feels like you've managed to elevate that, which is awesome news. I've got one more question because I'm being nagged a little bit by Alan. I've only got one more question because we can't go without.
I am not nagging you.
Always let me know. I'm always nagged. I'm always
vicious
nagged.
rumours.
Okay. But I have one more question. I can't let you go. A secret squirrel tells me that you're working on something stealth. How much can you share, and when can we expect to know more?
Yeah, that is true. So we're working on something stealth, and what I can share is it's about the thing that I enjoy doing most, which is recreating org structures and revealing what companies are working on, how that changes over time. And how we currently do that is recreating one-offs. So it's one org chart, it's a snapshot in time, and you have an idea of like what that org is looking like. Sometimes we can put some historical data there to compare things and show some sort of a trend or a move in a certain direction. But it's going to be quite static and it's a lot of work. And so what we're currently doing is creating a model that gives our clients 24/7 access to org structures of their competitors. While doing that, we keep track of all the changes. And it will also allow for trend analysis, and we can set up sort of an alert, and we can set up the sensitivity of changes in hiring patterns, indicating strategic shifts, for example, into new markets or new product lines. And they can be like a little bell or a little email that gets sent out to C-suite member or a strategy team member.
That's so cool. And so then when is the golden question?
So right now the MVP is being built, and then we're looking to find some pilot clients who, at a heavily discounted price, will get a view to one or two of their competitors. Help basically build it with their input, and I think we're sort of a couple of months away from that. So
how exciting!
Yeah,
how exciting!
Yeah,
what a journey, right? And with your experience, I have no doubt that when it comes to market, you will fly, and we look forward to seeing it. It sounds very cool indeed, and I love the idea that it's much more strategic.
And now it's the time for your nagging co-host to step in.
I knew it was coming.
As you say, it will fly, and time flies when you're talking TI, and especially when you're talking to Gerrit about TI, I think. This is now episode 2 of the Gerrit series, and I think we've probably delivered an even better one than the first time around. How was it for you, Gerrit?
Yeah, it's funny. It feels like a long time ago because so much has changed, but it's not really, right? It's pre-AI. I was realizing it's pre-AI. The last time we spoke, AI wasn't there.
No.
I'm glad we didn't speak about AI today.
Yeah.
Wow. That makes me feel old.
But that's weird, right?
Same thing. I'm thinking it's not, but actually that's quite scary. So it was episode 11, and we're now on episode 38. So let's make a kind of vague assumption that we're doing one a month ish, there or thereabouts.
That's very hopeful.
Well, yeah, but well, that's why I said ish. But there or there, let's say two and a bit years ago.
June. I can tell you, it was June 2021 when we did the recording.
We had a slow couple of years.
So there was COVID and no AI.
Wow.
And I was in Amsterdam. It's a lot has changed.
There's a lot.
I have a 2.5-year-old kid now.
That didn't even exist.
That wasn't even in the works.
Oh, dearie me! Wow.
That's how fast that goes.
Exactly.
No, it was lovely being on the show again, guys. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on. Really appreciate it. And thank you for listening, anyone who is and everyone who is. If you did enjoy Gerrit's return visit, make sure you check out episode 11, the origin story, so to speak. Thank you, as ever, for everything you do to share. And as we often say, stay curious, stay strategic, and most importantly, stay intelligent, folks.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. Before you go, I want to remind you about our generous sponsor, Lightcast. Here's that well-spoken fellow again to tell you about their amazing product.
Lightcast is the global authority on labour market data. By collecting, analysing and refining profiles, job postings and market data globally, Lightcast provides actionable, data-driven talent intelligence, giving HR leaders the context to make better decisions. The world's top companies trust Lightcast to deliver clarity in a complex world of work. For more, visit lightcast.io.